the landscape in the next 5 years, especially with respect to talent, how do you see that move?
So I think change is always constant, right? I think the technologies, as he rightly said, I think the shelf life is 3 years now. So that is the reason why investing in a very strong L&D internally, where you can constantly anticipate, be ready for what technologies your organization want to adopt, upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling, whatever you call it, right? I think that is going to be super critical. And there is always going to be a churn, right? And if at all GCCs really give you that strategic, career advantage for people as well, because if you are working only in one particular vertical, your ability to move cross-functional or moving from a tech to a domain or from a domain to a tech, there's so much of conscious opportunities we try to create for our top talent. So that is what, of course, holds people staying. And at the same time, your ability to cross-pollinate and keep the learning going.
If you look at tenure talent, right? If you're in a very niche space, if you're in financial services, if you go into specific, let's say there's a bond, OMS, auto management, it's a very unique, very, very interesting industry that needs a lot of depth before you can say, here's how you can innovate and change things. And that only comes when you go through multiple cycles of understanding the business. And therefore, there is a lot of value in the tenure you bring specifically in the GCCs, right? We're not shifting between, okay, I'm going to work for this and then work for that. Those days were there, and I think the IT services companies had to provide you that ability to switch. But in our case, it's about depth, right? So yes, the new talent that's coming in is very, their learnability is very high. They can pick up stuff and they want to push on the envelope, etc. But the true value is coming only when they get through the system for some time and understand, and they're doing it very well too. So what we're working on is kind of helping this multi-generational workforce have translation mechanisms to make sure that they both can endure the journey, right? It's like, any of you have teenage children, it's like a multi-generational home. You understand that sometimes we're all talking different languages. So in a workforce, similarly, you have so many different generations coming into work. You got to make sure your systems, like you said, in L&D function and other things, look at that very carefully to say, each of them have their value proposition and there's a place for it. And how do you intermingle that workforce and make it successful? Now, interestingly, we've also started seeing the first set of retirements happening from GCCs, right? Which, for the longest time, we only thought the public sector had retirements, but even GCCs, people are retiring from there. So there's
an average tenure is what, they've worked for 20 odd years?
Yeah, 20 plus years in the company. And so there's so much of knowledge. And when they leave, it is a big drain for us. Yeah. So the ability to make sure that they are connected to the larger ecosystem and that knowledge is retained over time is super valuable.
But given all the Gen AI stuff that is coming up and other stuff, we say learning is no longer just depth, but it is a T, right? So your ability to understand the domain, as rightfully said, which is probably not going to change. The technology around the domain is probably going to change. So having that core functional knowledge is important. But at the same time, with Gen AI, the roles are going to look so different because there are parts of it, machines are going to take over and do it. And it will give you analysis. But how do you work with that? How do you use it? Your prompt engineering. There are many other aspects of a particular role. In the past, if you assumed a role to be 100% domain expertise, but today, what percentages of it's going to be a very different composition of skills that we would be looking at. That is the reason why learning and development becomes important, because you may have the depth, but how do we teach you the width from a new skill perspective?
I'll just add one other aspect around. So we look at career vitality as a very important statistic in terms of how many of people are rotating across different roles and opportunities and learning. Because it's like I said in the beginning, there is power in the intersections. And you can only understand that value in the intersection when you've been across different businesses. So some of the senior talent, the other thing we also try to do is actively have a talent strategy that gives them opportunities to look across different businesses, because it really opens your eyes to, oh, I did this here, I'm doing this other thing somewhere else, and there's an opportunity. And that leads to, opportunities to create core and common components and reduce cost over time. All the different goals that you want to achieve suddenly start emerging. And also, let's be honest, when you're stuck in the same place, you have baggage for the longest time, you tend to believe that's the world, and then you move around and you see a very different world. So we allow that's a very active way to engage a tenured population also to go across, because there's value in that. And then imagine somebody coming in at an entry level, gets to work with someone who's tenured and then moves into a different business. It's a model through which you both learn and create value back.
Talent mobility is a big one for us. And I'm just talking about talent, right? The entry-level people coming in. To me, again, it's a little futuristic the way I look at it. Talent is more about skills and experience, as Vijay called out. In an organization, I feel like the hierarchies will get blurred in future. Today, if you are an experienced person, there's a lot to learn from the Gen X and the millennials, right? When I want to build an AI application, I don't go to my boss or to people who are tech architects. I go to a college fresher who has joined in over the last year or two into the organization. And there's a good probability I learn more from him, even though I may be leading the entire center here, right? So for me, it will be, I always draw analogies from sports. It's not about who is the senior-most person, who will be the most important person in the organization. It will be whom you give the ball, who is in the best position to score the goal.